Just a few blocks away from Central Park West, tucked between old brownstones and narrow streets, stood a modest three-story house that looked ordinary to anyone passing by. But inside that house lived a bond so deep, so unspoken, that it would soon defy everything people believed about loyalty and courage. 12-year-old Leo Carter had grown up faster than most kids his age. His father, Detective David Carter, worked long, unpredictable hours with the NYPD. His mother, Emily, tried her best to keep life normal, but Leo always felt safest when one presence was near him, his German Shepherd, Rex. Rex wasn't just a dog. He had been a birthday gift on Leo's 8th birthday, back when Leo was struggling after a serious illness. From the moment Rex padded into the living room, ears alert and eyes unusually focused, David noticed something different. This dog didn't just listen, he understood. Over the years, David trained Rex quietly, carefully. Not official K9 training, but something personal. Rex learned how to pull lightweight tools, recognize alarm sounds, and even press large emergency switches with his paw or nose. David used to joke, "This dog's got better instincts than half the rookies at the station." Leo and Rex were inseparable. Leo talked to him after school, shared secrets he never told anyone else, and slept better knowing Rex lay curled beside his bed, breathing steadily through the night. Rex watched everything. On winter nights when the wind screamed through the streets and snow layered the fire escapes, Rex stayed alert. He noticed the way David kissed Leo's forehead twice before leaving for night shifts. He noticed how Emily always locked the basement door but nervously glanced at the old heater down there. And Rex remembered. One freezing January evening, David left for an overnight shift just as heavy snow began to fall. Inside, Emily lit the fireplace to keep the house warm. Leo sat on the floor doing homework, Rex lying nearby, head up, ears forward. Then Rex smelled it. Not smoke yet, something sharper, wrong. Minutes later, a faint haze crept up from the basement stairs. Emily noticed too late. A sudden flare from faulty wiring near the old heater sparked, and within moments, thick smoke began to crawl upward like a living thing. Emily grabbed her phone and dialed 911, her voice shaking. But before help could arrive, flames blocked the stairway. Heat rose fast. The upstairs hallway filled with choking smoke. Leo started coughing. That's when Rex moved, not in panic, but with purpose. He turned once, looking at Leo, then sprinted down the hallway toward the room David rarely opened anymore, the one that still smelled like leather, metal, and duty. And in that room, Rex remembered something David never realized he'd taught him. As smoke thickened upstairs and Leo's vision began to blur, Rex reached the shelf and grabbed hold of something that could change everything. And what Rex did next would force an entire city to question what loyalty truly means. But could a dog really call for help? Or was Rex about to attempt something no one would believe if they didn't hear it themselves? The room Rex rushed into was dark, untouched for years. David's old police jackets hung stiffly in the closet, carrying the faint scent of sweat, rain, and long nights. On a small desk sat a retired police radio, its antenna bent, its surface scratched, but still alive. Smoke was creeping faster now. Rex jumped onto the chair, paws slipping for a moment before steadying himself. He stared at the radio. He didn't understand technology, but he remembered patterns. David's voice, his hands, the way he pressed a certain button whenever something went wrong during training drills at home. Rex placed his paw on the radio. Nothing. He barked, sharp and urgent, then pressed again, harder this time. The radio crackled. Across the city, inside a noisy precinct filled with ringing phones and overlapping voices, Detective David Carter froze. His radio hissed with static. Then came a sound that made his blood run cold. A bark. Not just any bark. Rex's bark. It echoed through the speaker, followed by violent crackling and a dull thump. The line stayed open. David stood up so fast his chair crashed backward. His partner stared at him. "That your dog?" someone muttered. David didn't answer. He was already moving. He recognized the rhythm of that bark, the same one Rex used during emergency drills. Short, repeated, panicked but controlled. Something was wrong at home. David shouted coordinates, flagged the dispatcher, and triggered a priority alert. Fire and rescue units were dispatched instantly. He grabbed his coat, heart pounding louder than the sirens outside. Back at the house, the second floor was nearly unbreathable. Emily was trying to shield Leo with her own body, coughing violently. Leo's head sagged forward, his breaths shallow, his vision darkened at the edges. Rex burst back into the hallway. He didn't hesitate. He ran into the bathroom, jumped up and tugged a towel from the rack. The sink faucet was hot, but Rex forced it with his paw, soaking the towel until it was heavy with water. He dragged it across the floor and nudged it against Leo's mouth and nose, pressing gently, exactly how David had once demonstrated using a CPR dummy and a video during a stormy night. Seconds mattered. Rex barked again, louder now, forcing Emily to look at him. He shoved the towel toward her, then turned and ran. To the window. Outside, snow fell thick and silent, mocking the chaos inside. Rex lowered his shoulder and rammed into a heavy wooden dresser. Once, twice, on the third hit, it scraped across the floor and stopped beneath the window. Sirens wailed closer. Rex climbed onto the dresser and barked with everything left in his lungs. Red lights flashed through the smoke-filled glass. Firefighters saw him, and they understood. But just as rescue reached the window, Rex's strength began to fail, and the hardest decision of his life was still ahead.
The firefighters didn't waste a second. Axes shattered the window, cold air rushing in like a miracle. One firefighter locked eyes with Rex, soot-covered, ears back, body shaking, and nodded as if the dog truly understood orders. "Kid first," he shouted. Emily was lifted through the window, coughing but conscious. Leo came next. His body was limp, his skin pale, the wet towel still pressed weakly to his face. As soon as he was outside, a paramedic began oxygen and chest compressions. Rex stayed where he was. Smoke burned his eyes. His chest felt tight, every breath scraping like broken glass, yet he didn't move, not until he saw Leo's chest rise again. Only then did Rex turn back. He looked down the hallway one last time, as if checking whether anyone else needed him. Flames crawled along the ceiling now, hungry and fast. The heat was unbearable. Rex leapt from the dresser toward the window, but his back legs clipped the edge. He slammed onto the floor hard. A firefighter reached in, coughing violently, stretching his arm. "I've got him!" Rex tried to stand. His legs betrayed him. Smoke flooded his lungs, his vision blurred, sounds muffled like he was underwater. Somewhere far away, he heard David's voice screaming his name. Strong hands finally wrapped around Rex's body, pulling him through the window and into the freezing night. Snow hit his fur, oxygen masked his face. Everything faded. Rex woke to beeping machines and unfamiliar smells. White walls, bright lights, tubes. A veterinary hospital. David sat beside him, uniform torn, eyes red and swollen. He pressed his forehead gently against Rex. "You did it, buddy. You saved them. You saved my family." News spread quickly. A police radio recording of the bark went viral. Reporters called Rex the dog who made the call. Firefighters visited, bringing a small metal badge engraved with the words, "Honorary First Responder." But Rex was tired. Doctors were honest. Smoke inhalation had damaged his lungs severely. His heart was working harder than it should. "He's holding on, but not for himself," the vet said quietly. A week later, Rex was brought home. That night, the house was silent. No smoke, no sirens, just snowfall outside and the soft hum of the heater, newly replaced. Rex lay on his favorite rug, facing the television. On the screen played a familiar story, his story. Photos of the fire, a shaky clip of firefighters pulling him out, a reporter's voice calling him a hero. Rex lifted his head. He looked at David. Slowly, deliberately, he pressed his head under David's hand, just like he had done every night since Leah was 8 years old. David stroked his fur, tears falling freely now. Rex closed his eyes. His breathing slowed, and then it stopped. But what David discovered the next morning would prove that Rex had planned everything long before the fire ever began.
Morning arrived quietly, as if the city itself was holding its breath. David hadn't slept. He sat on the living room floor where Rex had taken his final breath, staring at the empty rug. Leo slept upstairs, alive, safe, his chest rising steadily. Emily rested beside him, emotionally drained but grateful in ways words could never explain. As David stood to get water, his foot brushed against something near the old study door. A scratched wooden box. He froze. David recognized it instantly. It was the box he used during Rex's early training, filled with old police gear, radios, and practice switches. He hadn't opened it in years. The lid was slightly ajar. Inside, David found something that made his hands shake. The emergency radio was placed neatly on top. Beneath it lay a folded piece of paper, burned slightly at the edges. It wasn't a note written in words, but something far more haunting. Paw prints, darkened with soot, pressed carefully across the paper, as if Rex had stepped on it deliberately. The vet later confirmed it. Rex's paw pads had burns older than the fire, weeks old, minor, repeated. Rex had been practicing. He knew the house, the vet explained. He knew the sounds, he understood the patterns, and he was preparing. News of the discovery spread fast. The story changed. Rex wasn't just brave, he was intentional. The NYPD held a small private ceremony. David stood in uniform, Leo beside him, holding Rex's collar. Firefighters lined the street. A plaque was unveiled outside the house, simple and powerful. Rex, he had no voice, but he answered the call. People still stop there. They leave flowers, dog tags, letters written by children about loyalty and love. Leo visits the plaque every Sunday. Sometimes he talks to it. And sometimes, on quiet nights, David swears he hears soft paws on the stairs or feels a familiar weight beside the bed, like a promise that never truly left. Because some heroes don't wear badges, they wear fur. But the question remains, if Rex hadn't been trained, or if he hadn't loved so fiercely, would anyone have survived at all? Spring arrived slowly that year. Snow melted into the sidewalks around Central Park, and the city moved on, as it always does. But for the Carter family, time didn't simply move forward, it echoed. Leo returned to school after weeks of recovery. The doctors said he was lucky. The firefighters said he was saved by a hero. Leo said something different. "My dog taught me how to breathe,"
he told his class. At first, people smiled politely, but then Leo explained about the wet towel, the barking, the way Rex never left his side. The room went quiet. Even the teacher had to turn away for a moment. David changed too. He still worked cases, still wore the badge, but something inside him softened. He volunteered at youth safety programs, teaching kids about fire drills and emergency response. And always, always, he talked about one thing. Preparation is love in action, he would say. And sometimes love doesn't look the way you expect. One afternoon, months later, David received a call from the precinct. A K-9 training initiative was being launched, focused not on aggression, but on home safety and emergency intelligence in dogs. The program needed a name. They didn't have to ask David twice. It was called the Rex Protocol. Dogs were trained to recognize alarms, retrieve radios, activate emergency systems, and, most importantly, stay with victims until help arrived. The training manual began with a single sentence. This program exists because one dog refused to leave his family behind. The plaque outside the Carter home became a quiet landmark. Tourists didn't crowd it, but people who knew stopped. One evening, Leo stood there with a small German Shepherd puppy sitting at his feet. The puppy was clumsy, too big for his paws, ears still figuring out which way to point. Leo smiled. "I'm not replacing you," he whispered softly. "I'm continuing you." The puppy tilted its head, confused but calm. That night, as Leo slept, the puppy lay at the foot of his bed, breathing steadily. David watched from the doorway, heart tight but full. He finally understood something Rex had known all along. Heroes don't live forever, but what they teach us does. And sometimes the bravest thing a soul can do is stay just long enough to make sure everyone else survives without them. Because loyalty isn't about how long you live, it's about how deeply your absence is felt.